My name is Petra Covey. For as long as I can remember, I've been drawn to places others avoid, rooms left locked, buildings left behind, stories people refuse to finish. I don't tell these stories to scare you. I tell them because they linger, because once you hear them, they don't let you go quietly. What you're about to experience isn't a legend or an urban myth passed around for fun. It's a quiet kind of horror, the kind that lives in ordinary places and waits for someone to notice. Empty hallways. Lights that shouldn't be on. Footsteps where no one lives. This story began with a simple observation, one anyone could have ignored. But some truths don't like being ignored. They grow louder. Closer. More familiar. Listen carefully. Some buildings aren't empty, and some stories are already watching you. That I moved into the building on a Tuesday, which should have been my first warning. Nothing good ever starts on a Tuesday. The leasing office called it Maple Heights Residences, a name so aggressively normal that it felt rehearsed. The woman on the phone spoke too quickly, as if afraid I might interrupt her with questions she didn't want to answer. She told me the unit was available immediately. She did not say anything about neighbors. The building stood at the end of a narrow street that didn't appear on my phone's map until the last second. 5 floors. Gray concrete. No balconies. The windows were identical, evenly spaced, and dark, even though it was late afternoon. I remember thinking it looked unfinished, like a structure waiting for people who had never arrived. The lobby lights flickered when I stepped inside. There was no front desk, no security, no welcome sign. Just a row of mailboxes, all labeled, all locked. Every nameplate had a name. That was strange. I'd been told the building was practically empty. That I dragged my suitcase across the floor, the sound echoing too loudly, as if the space were hollow. Somewhere above me, a door closed. I froze, listening. Footsteps followed, slow and deliberate, pacing across a ceiling I couldn't see. Hello? I called out, hating how small my voice sounded. The footsteps stopped. An elevator waited at the end of the lobby, its doors already open. I hadn't pressed the button. Inside, the mirror was slightly warped, stretching my reflection just enough to make me look unfamiliar. The floor indicator flickered between numbers before settling on 1, even though I was already there. As the doors slid shut, I noticed something scratched into the metal panel beside the buttons. Not graffiti. Not words. Just tally marks. Dozens of them, overlapping, carved deep and uneven, like someone had counted something and lost track halfway through. The elevator began to rise. On the second floor, it stopped. The doors opened to an empty hallway. The lights were on. A radio played softly somewhere, static humming beneath a voice I couldn't quite hear. No one stepped in. The doors closed again. By the time I reached my floor, my skin felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath without realizing it. Apartment 3B was exactly as described. Clean, quiet, staged with neutral furniture that didn't feel touched by human hands. The air smelled faintly of dust and something colder beneath it. As I unpacked, I became aware of sounds around me. Water running in the walls. A chair scraping across the floor above. Laughter brief, muffled, and abruptly cut off. I checked the lease again. I was certain now that no one else was supposed to live here, yet that night, as I lay in bed listening to footsteps pass my door again and again, I understood the truth with a certainty that settled deep in my bones. The building was not empty. It had never been empty, and whatever lived here knew I had arrived. I tried to convince myself that the noise I'd heard the night before had been plumbing. Old buildings make sounds, everyone knows that. Pipes knock. Walls settle. Elevators sigh like tired lungs. That explanation should have been enough. It wasn't. Morning light filtered through the narrow kitchen window, turning the dust in the air into floating sparks. The building looked harmless in daylight. Ordinary, even. Beige walls. Scuffed tiles. The same silence I'd noticed when I first moved in, thick, but not aggressive. Patient that I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing unusual. For a moment, I felt foolish for being afraid at all. Then I stepped into the hallway. The corridor smelled different, not bad, just lived in. Warm air, faintly scented with soap and something metallic underneath. Like an elevator after too many people have used it in a short time. But that was impossible. I was the only tenant. The lease paperwork had made that very clear. That I stood still, listening. Somewhere above me, a door closed, not slammed. Not hurried. Just a careful, deliberate click. That my stomach tightened. That I walked toward the stairwell, my footsteps echoing too loudly. As I reached the landing, I noticed something new taped beside the fire extinguisher. A printed notice, edges curling slightly. Quiet hours begin at 10 p.m. Please be considerate of other residents. I stared at it for a long time. Other residents. That my name wasn't on the list below, but several apartment numbers were. Handwritten. Smudged, as if rewritten many times. That I checked the dates at the bottom, updated weekly. That I backed away slowly. The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. Every sound felt intentional. Every creak seemed placed. When evening came, I locked my door earlier than usual and turned on every light, even though the brightness made my apartment feel exposed. At exactly 9:58 p.m., I heard footsteps outside my door. They stopped. Someone cleared their throat. A woman's voice, close and polite, spoke through the door. Sorry to bother you. Just wanted to remind you about quiet hours. I couldn't move. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The doorknob didn't turn. The voice waited, patient, as if it knew I was there. After a moment, footsteps moved away down the hall. At 10 p.m. on the dot, the building fell completely silent, not the normal kind, the listening kind, and from inside my walls, something shifted as if the building itself had finally gone to sleep. Satisfied that everyone was home. That I stopped trying to convince myself the noises were normal. The night the elevator arrived without being called. I was standing in my kitchen, half asleep, counting the seconds between the dripping faucet and the hum of the refrigerator, when I heard the soft mechanical ding echo up the stairwell. It was faint, but unmistakable. The elevator had reached my floor. No one ever uses the elevator. The building has 6 floors, but only my name appears on the directory. No lights turn on behind the other doors. No mail arrives except mine. I had accepted that long ago, the same way you accept a missing tooth by learning how to chew around it. Still, I froze. The ding came again, closer this time, followed by the slow scrape of metal doors sliding open. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Footsteps followed. Not heavy. Not rushed. Just present. They crossed the hallway outside my apartment, stopped directly in front of my door, and waited. I stared at the peephole from across the room, heart pounding so loudly it felt like it might knock for me. The hallway light outside flickered, casting a long shadow beneath the door longer than it should have been. A polite knock followed. 3 taps. Careful. Practiced. I didn't answer. The doorknob turned anyway. It didn't open. My deadbolt held, but the pressure lingered, as if someone on the other side was testing how much resistance I would give. Then, slowly, the knob returned to its resting position. A voice spoke, soft enough that I almost convinced myself it was my own thought. You're home early tonight. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. My throat tightened, every question collapsing into one useless panic. How do you know me? The footsteps retreated. The elevator doors closed. Silence settled back into the building like nothing had happened. The next morning, there was a new name on the directory. .it was written in pencil. Messy. Familiar, mine misspelled, the way people do when they've only heard it spoken once. That was when I noticed something else. The apartment across the hall, the one I'd always known was empty, had a light on behind the door, and faintly, from inside, I heard the sound of someone pacing. Slowly, patiently. As if they had all the time in the world, and nowhere else left to go. The fourth night in the building taught me something I hadn't understood before. The sounds weren't random. I had started keeping track without meaning to. Footsteps always began at 1:12 a.m. Elevators chimed at 1:18. Doors opened and closed between 1:30 and 1:45, always in pairs, as if people were leaving together. At exactly 2 o'clock, everything stopped. Silence, thick and complete, like the building was holding its breath. That night, I stayed awake to test it. I sat on my couch with all the lights on, my back against the wall, phone in my hand. I told myself I was being rational. Old buildings make noise. Pipes shift. Wood settles. But rational thoughts lose their strength when they repeat too precisely. At 1:12, footsteps echoed above me. At 1:18, the elevator chimed. My stomach tightened. I stood and stepped into the hallway. The lights there were dimmer than usual, flickering softly. The carpet looked darker, pressed down with footprints that hadn't been there earlier. Fresh ones. Bare feet, shoes, some too narrow, some too long. At the far end of the hall, apartment 4B stood open. I was certain no one lived there. I had checked the mailbox myself, empty, dusty, unlabeled. Yet warm yellow light spilled from inside, and I could hear murmured voices, overlapping, polite, conversational. A dinner party. I told myself not to go closer. I did anyway. Inside 4B, the apartment was furnished, but wrong. The furniture was slightly outdated, like it had been chosen from different decades and forced to coexist. A long table filled the living room. Plates sat neatly arranged. Glasses were half filled with dark liquid that reflected no light. The chairs were occupied, every seat was taken. Men and women sat upright, smiling, hands folded or resting lightly on the table. They looked solid. Normal. Alive. Their eyes followed me as I stood frozen in the doorway. One of them spoke. "You're early." I live here," I said, immediately unsure if that was true. A woman near the head of the table tilted her head. "So do we." My chest tightened. "The building records say no one, we don't like records," the woman interrupted gently. "They forget us." The clock on the wall ticked loudly. 1:59 a.m. Every person at the table turned to look at it. "Stay," someone said. Not a command. An invitation. The clock clicked to 2:00. All at once, the lights went out. When they flickered back on, the apartment was empty. The table was gone. The furniture vanished. Dust coated the floor in an unbroken layer, like nothing had ever been there. I stood alone in an abandoned apartment, my heart pounding. Behind me, the hallway was silent, too silent. When I returned to my apartment, my front door was already open, and on my kitchen table sat a single place setting, arranged neatly, waiting. The first night I realized the building was watching me. I was standing in the kitchen with the lights off. I don't know why I did that. Maybe I wanted to see if the darkness behaved differently when I wasn't trying to control it. The apartment was quiet in the way empty places are supposed to be. No voices, no footsteps, no life. Yet the silence felt layered, like it was holding something underneath. I was rinsing a glass when I felt it, that sensation you get when someone is standing just behind you. I froze, my hands still under the tap. The mirror above the sink reflected the narrow kitchen behind me, the doorway, the fridge, the shadowed corner where the ceiling light never quite reached. Nothing was there. Still, the feeling didn't leave. It intensified, spreading across my shoulders, settling at the base of my neck. I slowly turned around. The apartment was exactly the same as it had been seconds ago, and yet, I absolutely knew that I was not alone. That I checked the door. Locked. Deadbolt secure. Windows shut. No sign of forced entry. No sound of movement. The building's rules still held. No one lived here but me. That was when the radiator clicked, not the normal metallic groan of heating pipes. This was deliberate. 3 sharp knocks from inside the wall, evenly spaced, like someone tapping to get my attention. That I stepped back. The knocking came again, louder this time. Then it moved. The sound traveled along the wall, passing the kitchen, slipping into the hallway, stopping just outside my bedroom. I followed it without thinking, every instinct screaming at me to do the opposite. The bedroom door was closed. That I don't remember closing it. My hand hovered over the handle. The knocking came once more, this time from the other side of the door. That I opened it. The room was empty. Bed untouched. Curtains still. No sign of anyone. But the air inside felt colder, heavier, as if it had been waiting for me to notice it. Then I saw the indentation on the mattress. That a single depression, deep and fresh, right beside my pillow. As if someone had just stood up, behind me, somewhere deep within the building. A door slammed, and I understood the twist too late. The building wasn't occupied by people. It was occupied by moments. And I had just given it a new one. She stopped checking the tenant board on the ground floor after the 6th time. It changed without anyone touching it. That morning, the brass letters had rearranged themselves again. Names she didn't recognize sat neatly where familiar ones had been the night before. Some were scratched faintly, as if erased and rewritten too many times. Others looked freshly polished, catching the weak hallway light in a way that made her eyes linger longer than they should have. Apartment 3B was listed as occupied now. She lived in 3B. The realization didn't arrive with panic. It came quietly, like a wrong note in a song you've heard your whole life. She stood there for a long time, grocery bag digging into her fingers, listening to the building breathe. That was the only way she could describe it. A low, slow pressure moving through the walls, rising and falling as if the structure itself needed air. When she finally climbed the stairs, she counted them again. 12 steps per floor. Always 12. She had checked since the first week, when she'd still believed logic could protect her. Her door. Something new waited. A welcome mat. It was old, fibers flattened with use. The word welcome almost rubbed away. She was certain it hadn't been there when she left that morning. She bent down, touched it with 2 fingers. Cold. Damp. As if it had been sitting there far longer than a few hours. Inside, the apartment smelled different, not bad. Just, lived in. She froze in the doorway. The furniture was where she'd left it. The couch, the table, the lamp with the chipped shade. But the air carried traces of something else. Soap she didn't use, a faint metallic note underneath. The kind of smell that suggested someone had been there long enough to leave a memory behind. Her bedroom door was closed. She never closed it. Her heart began to beat faster, louder than the building now. She told herself not to imagine fingerprints on the handle, not to imagine someone standing just on the other side, waiting to be acknowledged. Slowly, she reached out and opened the door. The room was empty, but the bed was made, not neatly. Carefully. The sheets pulled tight, pillow fluffed just right. On the nightstand sat a glass of water, half full. Beside it, her phone plugged into the charger. She knew, with absolute certainty, that she had left it in her bag. The screen lit up on its own. A notification appeared. No app name. Just text that you're late today. Her mouth went dry. Who are you? She whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. The message vanished. The screen went black behind her. somewhere deep in the walls, something shifted. A soft, collective sound like many people adjusting their weight at once. That night, she locked every door. She pushed a chair under the handle, then another for good measure. She slept with the light on, eyes burning, mind refusing rest. Every time she drifted close to sleep, she felt it again, that sense of being observed, not from the corners or the shadows, but from the walls themselves. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the building knocked, not on her door. On the walls. 3 slow taps, traveling down the hallway, stopping just outside her bedroom. She held her breath, counting heartbeats instead of seconds. When the taps came again, closer, more deliberate, she understood something she had been avoiding since the first night she moved in. The building wasn't pretending to be occupied. It was waiting to be noticed, and now that she had noticed, it wasn't willing to let her forget. I stopped trusting the elevator after it carried me to a floor that didn't exist. The button I pressed read 7, and I remember that clearly because my finger hesitated before touching it. 7 had become a dangerous number in the building. Too many things happened on the 7th floor: lights turning on by themselves, footsteps pacing just out of sight, doors unlocking without permission. Still, my apartment was on 5, and 7 was between where I was and where I needed to be. I told myself I was being irrational. The elevator doors slid shut with a softness that felt intentional. As it began to rise, the familiar hum deepened, stretching into something slower, heavier. The floor indicator flickered. 5, 6. Then it paused. The light dimmed, not fully dark, just enough to make the stainless steel walls reflect me imperfectly. My reflection lagged half a second behind my movements. The indicator changed to 1. My breath caught. There was no basement. I had checked the building plans myself. No underground parking. No storage. Nothing beneath the foundation except concrete and forgotten pipes. Yet the elevator continued descending, smooth and patient, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. When the doors opened, I smelled furniture polish and dust. The hallway looked identical to mine: same beige carpet, same flickering wall lights, same framed landscape prints hung at uneven angles. But something was wrong. The air felt used, like it had been breathed too many times and never replaced. Doors lined the corridor, all closed, all numbered. Each number was mine. Apartment 5A repeated again and again, stretching down the hall as far as I could see. I stepped out. The elevator doors closed behind me without sound. I didn't turn around. I already knew it would be gone. A light clicked on behind one of the doors, then another, then all of them. From inside the apartments came sounds of living dishes clinking, a television murmuring, a phone ringing endlessly without being answered. I approached the nearest door, heart pounding so hard it felt borrowed. The nameplate read my name, spelled correctly, in my handwriting that I didn't remember writing it. The door opened before I touched it. Inside was my apartment. Not similar, identical. Same couch. Same coffee stain on the rug. Same cracked mirror in the hallway. But the apartment was occupied. A woman sat at my kitchen table, back to me, stirring tea. She looked exactly like me. "You're late," she said, without turning around. My voice wouldn't come. My legs carried me forward anyway, each step heavier than the last. The woman finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, but calm. "Comfortable, I live here now," she said gently. "You kept leaving." "That's not possible," I whispered. She smiled in a way I recognized one I used when I'd already made a decision and didn't want to argue about it. "That's what you said too." At first. Behind her, the bedroom door creaked open. I saw movement. Another version of me passed by, carrying laundry. Further back, someone laughed, my laugh coming from the bathroom. "How many?" I asked. She considered. "Enough to keep the building full." The walls pulsed, just once, like a slow heartbeat. I understood then what the building did. It didn't house people. It kept them. Every time I ignored a sound, every time I convinced myself I was alone, something stayed behind. A moment. A version. A self that learned how to belong here. You can go back, she said, almost kindly. But this place will still be occupied. The lights flickered, the hallway outside filled with footsteps, dozens of them all moving toward the door that I ran. That I don't remember how I found the stairs. I don't remember how many floors I climbed or descended. When I finally burst into my real apartment, I collapsed against the door and slid to the floor, gasping. Everything was silent, too silent. Then, from the other side of the wall, I heard a chair scrape back, and someone who sounded exactly like me said, very clearly, "She's home." I used to believe the building followed rules. That belief didn't survive the 8th night that I woke to the sound of furniture being dragged across the ceiling of my apartment. Not above me, there was no apartment above mine. According to every official record, every floor above the 5th was sealed, unfinished, uninhabitable. Concrete shells. No wiring. No doors, yet something was rearranging its living room overhead. That I lay still, counting the sounds. 3 heavy scrapes. A pause. Then a soft, careful thud, like someone setting a chair down gently so it wouldn't wake a sleeping child. The precision of it frightened me more than violence would have. When the noise stopped, the silence felt staged. That I checked my phone. 2:17 a.m. No missed calls. No messages. No alerts. Outside my window, the courtyard lights were on again, glowing with that dull yellow that flattened shadows instead of casting them. I was sure I'd turned them off before bed. That I got up and pressed my ear to the ceiling. That I heard breathing, not echoing. Not traveling through pipes or vents. Directly above me, slow and patient, like someone listening back. That I pulled away, heart racing. The intercom buzzed. That I nearly dropped my phone. That no one had used the intercom since I moved in. The panel by my door was old, its buttons yellowed, the speaker grill clogged with dust. Management had told me it was disconnected. Decorative, they'd said. Like that explained anything. The buzzing stopped. Then a voice crackled through, distorted but unmistakably human. "Sorry," it said. "We're trying not to make noise tonight." My mouth went dry. "Who is this?" A pause, just long enough to feel intentional. "Your neighbors," the voice replied, gently. "We didn't mean to disturb you." I laughed, one sharp, disbelieving sound. "There are no neighbors. No one lives here." Another pause. "Longer this time, that's what they tell you," the voice said. "But you hear us, don't you?" The line went dead. That I didn't sleep after that. I sat on my couch with the lights on, watching the shadows on the walls shift in ways that didn't match passing cars or wind. At 4:03 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Slow. Measured. They stopped directly in front of my apartment. Something brushed the door, not knocking. Tracing. When I finally worked up the courage to look through the peephole, the hallway was empty. But the carpet directly outside my door was indented, as if someone had been standing there for a long time and had only just left at in the morning. I went to the building office. The woman behind the desk smiled when she saw me, the same tight, professional smile she always wore. Her nameplate still read Linda, though I'd never heard anyone else call her that. "I think someone's living above me," I said. "I heard them last night. They used the intercom." She didn't look surprised. "That terrified me. There are no residential units above the 5th floor," she said calmly. "You know that." "Then who answered me?" She tilted her head slightly. answered you?" "Yes," I said. "They said they were my neighbors." Linda typed something into her computer. The screen reflected faintly in her glasses, but I couldn't see what was on it, just rows and rows of identical boxes. "Did they sound upset?" she asked. "No," I said. "They sounded polite." Her fingers stopped moving. "That's good," she said softly. "It's worse when they're upset." I stared at her. "Who is they?" She met my eyes for the first time. "Occupants," she said. "Temporary ones." My chest tightened. "This building is supposed to be empty." Linda smiled again, wider now. "Too wide, it is," she said. "That's why there's room." That afternoon, when I returned to my apartment, something was waiting for me on the kitchen table. A mug that I didn't own it. It was ceramic, chipped along the rim, still warm to the touch. Inside was a thin ring of coffee residue, as if someone had just finished drinking and set it down carefully, thoughtfully. Beside it lay a small handwritten note. "Sorry about the noise," it read. "We're still learning how to live quietly." The elevator stopped between floors, not with a jolt, just a soft, obedient pause, like it had reached a conclusion of its own. The light stayed on. The hum didn't die. The doors didn't open. I stood alone inside it, staring at my reflection in the brushed metal wall. For a second, I thought the reflection blinked out of sync with me. I raised my hand. It followed. Relief came too quickly, and that made it feel false. I pressed the button for my floor again. Nothing. The building was quiet in the way that feels intentional. Not empty waiting. I pressed the emergency call button. It lit up red but made no sound. No voice answered. The silence swallowed the idea of help before it could even feel real. Then I felt it. Weight, not physical pressure, but awareness, like the building had leaned closer. The walls seemed nearer than before. The air smelled faintly of old dust and something warmer beneath it. Breath. Maybe a sound came from the other side of the doors. Footsteps, slow. Careful. As if whoever was out there didn't want to be heard, but also didn't mind if I knew. "I know you're in there," a woman's voice said softly. My stomach dropped. She sounded like me, same pitch. Same tired steadiness I heard in my own voice when I spoke late at night. I opened my mouth to respond, then stopped. The reflection in the metal wall was no longer looking at me. It was looking at the doors. "I live here too," the voice continued. "You just don't remember yet." The elevator lights flickered. The floor indicator changed, numbers sliding too fast to read before stopping on something that wasn't a number at all. Just a blank, glowing line. The doors opened, not to a hallway. To my apartment. Same peeling paint by the doorframe. Same crooked picture nail I never fixed. Warm yellow light spilling out like nothing had ever been wrong. I could see my couch, my table, the mug I'd left in the sink that morning. Home, behind me. The elevator doors stayed open. I could feel it waiting, patient, certain, inside the apartment. Someone moved. I took a step forward before I realized I was crying. She was standing in my kitchen. Me but rested. Hair brushed. Shoulders not hunched. She smiled with familiarity, not menace. "You came back late," she said gently. "They don't like that." "Who?" I whispered. She glanced toward the walls, the ceiling, the floor, as if acknowledging an audience. "The residents. You said no one lives here." "No one does," she replied. "Not the way you think." She stepped closer. The air felt thicker with every inch she crossed. "This building keeps versions," she said. "Moments that almost left. People who stayed too long. People who noticed." "I want to leave," I said, her smile softened. You already did. The lights flickered again. Somewhere behind me, the elevator chimed a cheerful, final sound that I understood then. The building wasn't full of people, that it was full of endings that refused to stay separate, and it had finally decided which one of us belonged here. By the time I reached the 10th night, I stopped pretending the building followed rules. The elevator no longer stopped at the floor I pressed. Sometimes it skipped numbers entirely. Sometimes it opened onto hallways I had never seen before, hallways that smelled different, felt older, as if they belonged to a previous version of the building that hadn't been fully erased. That night, the elevator opened on my floor. At least, I thought it was my floor. The lights were dimmer than usual. The carpet pattern was reversed, the colors wrong, like a photograph printed from a negative. My apartment door was there, number intact, but something about it made my chest tighten. It looked used. Scratches around the handle. Faint stains near the bottom of the frame that I hadn't noticed those before. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was where it should have been, except it all felt slightly out of place, like a room recreated from memory by someone who hadn't lived there long enough. My couch cushions were indented, though I knew I hadn't sat there that day. A mug sat in the sink with a lipstick mark on the rim. I don't wear lipstick. The TV was on, not loud, just a low murmur of static and voices layered beneath it. When I turned it off, the voices didn't stop. They drifted through the walls instead, clearer now, overlapping conversations that didn't acknowledge one another. Someone laughed in the apartment above me, someone cried behind the bathroom wall, someone knocked softly, patiently on my bedroom door. I stood frozen in the living room, heart pounding, every instinct screaming that this was wrong, that I had crossed into something I couldn't uncross. The knock came again, gentle, almost polite. I opened the door. The room was empty. No bed. No window. Just bare walls and a single door on the opposite side, identical to the one I was standing in. I turned around. The living room was gone. I stood in a hallway now long, narrow, lined with doors on both sides. Every door had a number, every number was mine. I walked forward, slowly, counting my breaths. As I passed each door, I heard something from inside, a phone ringing, water running, a voice whispering my name in a tone I recognized from dreams. One door was ajar. Inside, I saw myself sitting at a small kitchen table, staring at a lease agreement. My hands were shaking. I remembered this moment the day I moved in, the hesitation I ignored because rent was cheap and the building was quiet. The version of me inside looked up, our eyes met. She smiled, the door slammed shut, the hallway lights flickered, and suddenly all the doors opened at once. Inside each one was a version of me, older, younger, tired, angry, hollow. Some were unpacking boxes. Some were sleeping. Some were standing at windows that showed nothing outside. All of them looked up, all of them turned toward me. The hallway began to fill with footsteps. I ran. I don't remember how I got back to my apartment. I only remember slamming the door, locking it, and sliding down against it, gasping for air that felt too thin to breathe properly. The building settled around me, the sounds faded. When I finally looked up, my reflection stared back at me from the dark TV screen. It blinked. I did not, and for the first time since moving in, I understood the truth with absolute clarity. The building wasn't occupied by others. It was occupied by me. Every version that stayed, every version that didn't leave, every version that ignored the signs, and I was running out of rooms. I stopped trusting silence after that night. The building had gone quiet in a way that felt intentional, as if it were holding its breath. No footsteps above me. No murmurs through the walls. Even the pipes, which had groaned and knocked like restless bones since I moved in, were still. I stood in my kitchen, listening so hard my ears rang, and understood something I had been avoiding for days. The building wasn't empty. It was waiting. I checked the hallway through the peephole. The corridor lights flickered, casting long, uneven shadows that didn't quite match the objects creating them. Apartment doors lined the hall, all closed, all identical. I knew, because I had checked, that every single one was officially unoccupied. No names on mailboxes. No records at the city office. No lease but mine, yet last night, someone had knocked on my door. 3 slow knocks, not asking, informing that I hadn't answered. I stood frozen behind the door, my hand over my mouth, listening as something on the other side breathed. Not heavily. Not angrily. Just patiently, like it knew time would eventually solve the problem for it. When the knocking stopped, I thought it was over, then I heard footsteps walking away. They didn't fade. They didn't echo, they stopped directly outside my bedroom wall. That was when the scratching began. Tonight, I decided to follow the sound instead of hiding from it. That I stepped into the hallway. The air felt colder here, thicker, like it had been used too many times. As I walked, I noticed something wrong with the doors. Some of them had numbers that changed when I wasn't looking. Apartment 3B became 38. Then just B. One door had no handle at all, only faint marks where hands had pressed over and over again. That I reached the stairwell. The stairwell was not supposed to go down past the lobby, but it did. That I descended slowly, counting steps to stay grounded. After the 3rd floor, my phone buzzed. No notification. Just vibration, over and over, until I turned it off. The walls grew narrower. The light above flickered, then steadied, revealing something carved into the concrete. Names, hundreds of them, some scratched deeply. Some barely visible. Some written so neatly they looked engraved. I recognized one. Mine. That I stumbled back, heart pounding, and that's when I heard it behind me, footsteps, not echoing, matching mine. That I turned. The stairwell was empty, but the mirror at the landing wasn't. That it showed me standing there, except I was smiling, and I wasn't alone. By the time I reached what the elevator claimed was the 12th floor, I no longer trusted numbers. The doors slid open to a hallway that smelled faintly of dust and warm electricity, like an old machine left running too long. The lights were on, but they pulsed softly, as if the building itself was breathing. Every door along the corridor was closed. No sounds. No footsteps. No voices. Yet I felt watched with the same certainty I had felt every night since moving in. That I walked slowly, my footsteps swallowed by the carpet. Halfway down the hall, I noticed something wrong with the doors. Each one had a nameplate, but the names were scratched out, layered over each other so many times they'd become grooves. I ran my fingers over one. The indentations were deep. Desperate. At the very end of the corridor stood a door without a number. It was already open. Inside was an apartment laid out exactly like mine. Same couch. Same cracked mirror. Same lamp I never remembered buying. But it was cleaner, untouched, like a version of my life that had never been lived. Someone was sitting at the kitchen table. She looked up. She looked like me, not a reflection, older, maybe, or more worn, but unmistakably mine. Same scar on the wrist. Same tired eyes. She smiled gently, the way you do when you already know the ending. You're late, she said. That my throat tightened. Who are you? She folded her hands. I'm who stays. The realization hit slowly, like pressure behind the eyes. All the sounds I'd heard. The footsteps. The neighbors I never saw. The doors opening and closing at night. They weren't strangers, they were residents who had once asked the same questions I did. Why me? I whispered. She gestured around the apartment. Because you noticed. The lights flickered harder now. Somewhere deep in the building, something shifted, walls settling, elevators moving without being called. The building was awake. You can leave, she said. But it won't forget you. And if I stay? Her smile faded. Neither will you. The floor beneath us trembled slightly, like a held breath finally released. I understood then that the building didn't trap people. It offered continuity. Occupancy without escape. A place where loneliness could pretend to be presence forever. The hallway lights went out behind me, and the door began to close. The building was quiet when I woke up, not the empty kind of quiet I had grown used to, but something heavier, deliberate. As if every wall, every ceiling beam, every sealed apartment was holding its breath. Morning light crept through my window in thin, pale lines, revealing dust that hadn't been there the night before. Or maybe it had. My sense of time had stopped being reliable that I sat up slowly, listening. No footsteps above me. No murmurs through the walls. No elevator hum. For the first time since I moved in, the building felt honest that I should have felt relieved.